The St. Augustine Lighthouse stood like a bone-white finger against the October sky, its red brick base weathered by centuries of salt spray and storms. Marina Rodriguez had driven 3 hours from Orlando to spend the weekend researching local maritime history for her dissertation, but now, standing in the shadow of the 165-foot tower, she felt an inexplicable chill that had nothing to do with the autumn breeze. The lighthouse keeper's quarters, now converted into a museum, seemed to watch her with dark windows as she approached. She'd arranged a private after-hours tour with the museum director, Dr. Ellen Hartwell, who met her at the entrance with a ring of old brass keys. "You're brave to come alone," Dr. Hartwell said, her silver hair catching the last rays of daylight. "Most researchers prefer daylight hours." Marina shouldered her bag, heavy with recording equipment and notebooks. "I work better without distractions. Besides, I've heard the best stories come out at night." Dr. Hartwell's smile faltered slightly. "Stories, yes. We have plenty of those." She unlocked the heavy wooden door, which groaned open like a coffin lid. "Just remember, Miss Rodriguez, some stories don't like being told." The interior smelled of old wood, brass polish, and something else Marina couldn't quite identify. Something metallic and stale. Dr. Hartwell flicked on lights as they moved through the ground floor displays, but the shadows seemed to cling to the corners, reluctant to retreat. "The lighthouse was built in 1874, Dr. Hartwell began, her voice taking on the practiced cadence of a tour guide. "The original wooden tower was destroyed in the Civil War. This one replaced it, but..." She paused, studying Marina's face. "You said you wanted the real stories, didn't you? Not the sanitized version we give families?" Marina nodded eagerly, pulling out her digital recorder. "Everything. I want to know about the accidents, the deaths, the unexplained incidents. My research focuses on how maritime tragedies affect local folklore." "Then let me tell you about William Russell." Dr. Hartwell led her toward a display case containing old photographs and documents. He was the head lighthouse keeper from 1875 to 1907. A dedicated man, never missed a night of lighting the beacon. Even when the yellow fever epidemic hit St. Augustine in 1888, Russell stayed at his post. His wife and 2 children died in that epidemic, but he couldn't leave. Too many ships depended on his light. Marina studied the photograph of Russell, a gaunt man with hollow eyes and a beard that couldn't hide his sunken cheeks. "He looks haunted." He was. After his family died, Russell began talking to himself. Other lighthouse keepers reported hearing conversations coming from the lamp room at night, but when they climbed up to check, they'd find Russell alone. He claimed his wife was still with him, helping him tend the light. Dr. Hartwell moved to another photograph, this one showing the lighthouse during a storm. Lightning illuminated the tower, and Marina could swear she saw a figure in the lamp room window, though the image was too blurry to be certain. Russell died in 1907, found at the base of the lighthouse stairs. The official report said he fell, but there were inconsistencies. His body was found too far from the stairs, as if he'd been thrown. And witnesses reported seeing the lighthouse beacon flashing erratically that night, spelling out messages in Morse code. "What kind of messages?" Dr. Hartwell's voice dropped to a whisper. "Help me." Over and over again. "Help me." Marina felt goosebumps rise on her arms. "May I see the original incident reports?" "Of course. But first, let me show you something else." Dr. Hartwell led her up a narrow staircase to the second floor. The wooden steps creaked ominously under their feet, and Marina noticed several of the boards had been replaced, their newer wood standing out like scars. The second floor housed the keeper's living quarters, preserved as they would have appeared in the early 1900s. A parlor with horsehair furniture, a kitchen with a wood-burning stove, bedrooms with iron bed frames and threadbare quilts. Everything looked authentic, but something felt wrong. The air was too still, too heavy, as if the rooms were holding their breath. "This was the Russell family's home," Dr. Hartwell said, her voice echoing strangely in the confined space. "After William died, the lighthouse service had trouble keeping keepers here. Men would request transfers after just a few weeks. They complained of voices, of shadows moving when no one was there, of feeling constantly watched." Marina walked through the parlor, her footsteps muffled by a faded Persian rug. Near the fireplace, she stopped. The temperature had dropped noticeably, and her breath began to mist slightly. Dr. Hartwell, is the heating system malfunctioning? The older woman frowned, pulling a cardigan tighter around her shoulders. We don't heat this floor. Too expensive. But it's never been this cold before. She moved to check a thermometer on the wall. My God. It's 42 degrees in here. It was 75 when I unlocked the building. Marina's recorder beeped, indicating low battery life, though she'd charged it fully before leaving Orlando. She pulled out a backup device, but it too showed critical battery levels. That's strange. Both my recorders are dying simultaneously. A floorboard creaked overhead. Both women froze, looking up at the ceiling. The sound came again, slow, deliberate footsteps crossing the third floor. Is someone else here? Marina whispered. Dr. Hartwell shook her head slowly. No. I'm the only one with keys, and I locked the door behind us. Another creak, directly above them. The third floor is off limits to tours. Structural damage from a fire in 1968. The footsteps stopped. Marina found herself straining to listen, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain Dr. Hartwell could hear it. Should we call someone? Who? The police? Dr. Hartwell's laugh was shaky. What would I tell them? That we're hearing footsteps in a building that's supposedly empty? They'd think we were crazy. A door slammed somewhere above them, the sound echoing through the building like a gunshot. Marina jumped, nearly dropping her recorder. Okay, that's enough. Dr. Hartwell started toward the stairs. We're leaving. Now. But as they reached the staircase, they found their path blocked. The temperature had dropped so drastically that their breath came in visible puffs, and frost was actually forming on the wooden banister. More alarming, the stairs themselves seemed to be moving not physically, but the shadows cast by the overhead light were shifting and writhing like living things. Dr. Hartwell? Marina's voice was barely a whisper. Look at the walls. The wallpaper in the stairwell, a faded floral pattern from the 1920s, was changing. Dark stains were spreading across it like spilled ink, forming shapes that looked disturbingly like human figures. As they watched in horror, the stains began to move, the dark figures climbing the walls toward the third floor. A voice drifted down from above, a man's voice, hoarse and desperate. Martha? Martha, where are the children? I can't find the children. Dr. Hartwell grabbed Marina's arm. That's William Russell's voice. I've heard recordings from 1906. That's his voice. The voice came again, closer now. The light's going out, Martha. I can't keep the light burning alone. Help me, Martha. Please help me. A figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Marina's scream died in her throat as she saw the gaunt man from the photograph, but something was terribly wrong with him. His flesh was translucent, and she could see the wall behind him through his body. Worse, his eyes were completely black, like pools of tar, and when he opened his mouth, no sound came out despite the voice they continued to hear. He's been waiting, Dr. Hartwell whispered, her face white as bone. All these years, he's been waiting for someone to help him tend the light. The figure of William Russell began descending the stairs, his feet making no sound on the wooden steps. With each step, the temperature dropped further. Ice crystals began forming on the windows, and Marina realized with growing terror that their breath was no longer just visible, it was crystallizing and falling like snow. Run, Dr. Hartwell gasped. We have to run. But when they turned toward the exit, they found the door had vanished. Where it should have been was solid wall, covered in the same wallpaper that now writhed with dark figures throughout the stairwell. This isn't possible, Marina said, running her hands over the smooth wall where the door had been. Doors don't just disappear. You wanted the real stories, Dr. Hartwell said, her voice hollow with resignation. You wanted to know about the unexplained incidents. Well, here's one that never made it into any official report. In 1923, a maritime historian named Dr. James Whitmore came here to research the Russell family. He was found 3 days later in the lamp room, frozen solid. In July. In Florida. The voice from above grew more insistent. I need help with the light. Ships are coming. The ships will crash if the light goes out. Russell's ghostly figure had reached the bottom of the stairs and was now moving toward them with purpose. As he approached, Marina could see details that made her stomach lurch. His lighthouse keeper's uniform was soaked with something dark and viscous that wasn't quite blood. His hands, reaching toward them with desperate pleading, were missing several fingers. And the smell, that metallic, stale odor she'd noticed earlier, was coming from him. It was the smell of old death, of bones left too long in salt water. "He wants us to help him," Dr. Hartwell whispered. "He's been alone so long, and he needs help tending the light. But everyone who helps him." She didn't finish the sentence. Marina pressed herself against the wall where the door should have been. What happened to Dr. Whitmore? Really? He went up to the lamp room. They found him there, but he wasn't alone. There was another body with him, a woman in a Victorian dress. Perfectly preserved, as if she'd died yesterday. But according to the records, Martha Russell had been buried in Ptolemaios Cemetery in 1888. The ghostly figure stopped just inches from Marina. This close, she could see that his black eyes weren't empty, they were filled with an endless sorrow that seemed to pull at her soul. When he spoke, his mouth moved a fraction of a second after the words reached her ears. "Please. I've been alone so long. The ships. I must light the beacon for the ships." Marina found herself nodding, though she fought against it. There was something compelling about his desperation, something that made her want to help ease his eternal torment. "Yes," she heard herself saying. "I'll help you." "No." Dr. Hartwell grabbed her arm. "Don't listen to him. Once you agree, you can't leave. You become part of the lighthouse, part of his eternal watch." But it was too late. Marina felt a strange pulling sensation, as if invisible hands were drawing her toward the staircase. The ghostly Russell smiled, a horrible expression on his decaying features, and began ascending the stairs, beckoning for her to follow. "Come," his voice echoed from everywhere at once. "Come see the light. Come help me keep the ships safe." Marina's feet moved against her will, following the specter up the creaking staircase. Dr. Hartwell tried to hold her back, but her hands passed through Marina's arm as if it were made of mist. "No," Dr. Hartwell sobbed. "Not another one. Please, not another one." As they climbed, Marina became aware that they weren't alone on the stairs. Shadowy figures pressed close around them, men and women in clothing from different eras, all with the same hollow, black eyes as Russell. She recognized one face from a photograph she'd seen downstairs, Dr. James Whitmore, still wearing his 1920s suit, ice crystals glittering in his hair and beard. "Welcome to the watch," he said, his voice like wind through a broken window. "You'll find the work rewarding. Eternal, but rewarding." They reached the third floor, the one Dr. Hartwell had said was damaged by fire. But there was no fire damage here. Instead, Marina found herself in a perfectly preserved 1870s bedroom, complete with a canopied bed where a woman in a Victorian nightgown lay still as death. The woman's eyes opened as they entered, revealing the same bottomless black that marked all the lighthouse's eternal residents. "Martha?" Russell's voice was filled with desperate joy. "Martha, I've brought help. She's going to help us tend the light." The woman Martha Russell sat up slowly, her movements accompanied by the sound of settling bones. When she spoke, her voice was like rustling leaves. "William, you've done well. She looks strong. She'll last longer than the others." Marina tried to scream, tried to run, but her body was no longer her own. She watched in horror as her hands reached out to touch Martha's ice-cold fingers, sealing some sort of supernatural compact. "Now come," Russell said, leading them toward another staircase, one that definitely hadn't been there when she'd toured the building earlier. "Come see the lamp room. Come see where you'll spend eternity." They climbed what felt like hundreds of steps, though Marina knew the lighthouse was only 165 feet tall. The staircase seemed to spiral upward forever, passing windows that showed views that couldn't possibly exist, ships from different centuries sailing on dark seas, storms that raged with supernatural fury, and always, the beam of the lighthouse cutting through impossible darkness. Finally, they reached the lamp room at the top of the tower. But this wasn't the modern LED array Marina had expected. Instead, she found herself in a chamber that existed outside of time itself. A massive Fresnel lens dominated the space, but instead of electric light, it was powered by something far more sinister. At the center of the lens, suspended in a glass cage like a grotesque specimen, was a human heart. It beat slowly, steadily, and with each pulse, The lighthouse beam swept across the dark waters. Around the base of the lens, Marina could see other hearts, dozens of them, in various states of decay. Some still beat weakly, others had long since stopped. Each keeper gives their heart to the light, Russell explained, his voice now coming from the lens itself. It's the only way to power the beacon properly. Electric lights are for the living. The dead need something more substantial. Marina looked down at her chest and realized with growing horror that she could no longer feel her heartbeat. Her hand pressed against her shirt, finding only emptiness where her heart should be. In the glass cage at the center of the lens, a fresh heart had appeared, young, strong, and beating steadily. "No," she whispered, but even her voice sounded different now, hollow and distant like an echo in a vast cavern. "Yes," Martha Russell said, appearing beside her with that same bone-chilling smile. "Welcome to the Eternal Watch, my dear. You'll find the first century passes quickly." Dr. Hartwell's voice drifted up from far below, growing fainter with each word. "Marina? Marina, where are you? Please answer me." Marina tried to call back, tried to warn the museum director to run, to get help, to never return to this cursed place. But when she opened her mouth, the only sound that emerged was the low, mournful wail of the lighthouse foghorn. She watched through the lens as Dr. Hartwell searched the building frantically, calling her name. The older woman checked every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. But she would never find Marina, because Marina was no longer entirely in the physical world. Hours passed, or perhaps days. Time had no meaning in the lamp room. Dr. Hartwell eventually left, and Marina could see her through the lighthouse beam as she sat in her car, crying and making frantic phone calls. Police came and searched the building thoroughly. They brought search dogs, forensics experts, even a team with ground-penetrating radar. They found no trace of Marina Rodriguez. The official report would state that she had somehow left the building without Dr. Hartwell noticing, possibly through a window. It would suggest she had suffered some kind of mental break, perhaps triggered by the stress of her graduate studies. Search teams would comb the beaches and waters around St. Augustine for weeks, but they would find nothing. Because Marina was still there, in the lamp room, tending the eternal beacon alongside William and Martha Russell and all the others who had been drawn into the lighthouse's supernatural embrace. She watched the seasons change through the lens, watched tourists visit the museum below, watched new researchers arrive with their recording equipment and eager questions about the lighthouse's dark history. And she waited. Waited for the next person who would ask for the real stories, who would want to know about the unexplained incidents, who would stay after hours to get closer to the truth. Because the lighthouse was always hungry for new keepers, and the beacon's heart-powered light needed constant tending. On foggy nights, visitors to St. Augustine sometimes reported seeing strange figures moving in the lamp room of the lighthouse, figures that shouldn't be there, since the lighthouse was automated and required no human operators. Local ghost tour guides loved to tell stories about these sightings, not knowing how close to the truth they really were. And if you listened carefully on those foggy nights, if you stood close enough to the lighthouse base and strained your ears against the sound of the waves, you might hear voices calling from the lamp room. Voices pleading for help, for someone to join the Eternal Watch, for fresh hearts to power the beacon that kept the dead ships sailing safely through the supernatural seas. Marina had learned the truth that Dr. Hartwell had tried to warn her about: some stories don't like being told because they're still being written. And the St. Augustine Lighthouse was writing its story in the hearts of the curious, the brave, and the foolish, one keeper at a time. The beacon continued to sweep across the dark waters, its light powered by the beating hearts of those who had sought to understand its mysteries. And in the lamp room, the eternal keepers tended their supernatural flame, waiting patiently for the next researcher, the next curious soul who would ask the wrong questions and discover that some historical investigations exact a price far higher than anyone could imagine. The lighthouse stood sentinel against the Florida sky, beautiful and terrible, its red brick base stained with salt and secrets. And somewhere in the lamp room at its peak, Marina Rodriguez continued her research, not into maritime history, but into the infinite mystery of what lies beyond death, beyond time, beyond the reach of mortal understanding. She had wanted the real stories. Now she was one. Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like and subscribe button, and then share it with your friends. Your support helps us grow and create even more awesome content. We appreciate you being part of the journey.